Tonight the west wind blows through the hills, bending the wheat, through the bracken, over the gorse, howling across the peat. Hellfires redden the sky, and there's witches on the wind. And it's into the darkness of winter we go, as the wheel of the season spins. And on this night serene, when our fires are burning bright, we'll call the Holy Lord to begin our pagan rite. We'll come with sprigs of elder, and we'll come with the leaves of yew, as we step out of the old and dance into the new. On the hills they light the bonfires to burn upon the sacred ground. Shadows dance across the flames to the witch bell sound. Spirits call with haunted voices from the other side. And it's into the darkness and out of the light as the earth turns with the tide. And on this night serene, when our fires are burning bright, we'll call the Holy Lord to begin our pagan rite. We'll come with sprigs of elder, and we'll come with the leaves of yew, as we step out of the old and dance into the new. This night will mark the end and beginning of our year. We'll call out to the ones of old to make the future clear. Beneath the moon of the elder tree, and by the embers glowing red, they'll pass into the summer land until the winter's fled. And on this night serene, when our fires are burning bright, we'll call the Holy Lord to begin our pagan rite. We'll come with sprigs of elder, and we'll come with the leaves of yew, as we step out of the old and dance into the new. And out of the light as the earth turns with the tide. And on this night serene, when our fires are burning bright, we'll call the Holy Lord to begin our pagan rite. We'll come with sprigs of elder, and we'll come with the leaves of yew, as we step out of the old and dance into the new. We'll come with sprigs of elder, and we'll come with the leaves of yew, as we step out of the old and dance into the new.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the ParaX Radio Network. The opening song tonight was called Holly Lord by Spiral Dance, and if you listened to Tim's show in the last hour, you heard some of their very terrific music. But I chose Holly Lord because, as they say, 'tis the season, and the Yuletide is upon us, and I thought it would be interesting to talk about the saints and deities of the season. And who better to talk about saints and deities than my guest, Judika Illes. She's the author of many books on metaphysical topics, including the Encyclopedia of Mystic Saints and Sages. Now, Judika began her metaphysical career really early in life, and that resulted in a lifelong pursuit of metaphysical wisdom. She's not only a walking encyclopedia of mystical knowledge, she's written several of them besides Mystic Sages and Saints. And just the other day, I bought myself a Yuletide gift, and that was the last one of her encyclopedias that I didn't have, which is the Encyclopedia of Witches and Witchcraft. So now I think I'm good to go. Judika, welcome back.
Thank you, Marla. I'm so happy to be here.
Me too. I've
been
yes, and I've been smiling all week thinking about it, and I learned some stuff, and as I always tell you, every time I pick up one of your books and start kind of doing my homework, you fascinate me with stuff. I mean, it's like I get a head rush from things I didn't know. So you're really good for my brain because it kind of keeps me going in a good way.
Well, that's really how I write a lot of, I find things that are they fascinate me, and I just think they're so interesting. And I can't believe that other people wouldn't find them interesting, too.
Well, I do. And as a writer, I go looking for things that are kind of under the rocks and off to the sides, too, because so often you hear the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to dig some stuff up. So, be warned, I did dig a few things up. But you wrote them, so we should be just fine.
Yeah.
I think. All right, so the Yuletide season, which officially begins at sundown tomorrow and ends on January 6th, is a very magical time of year in many ways. And one of the most beloved saints this time of year is, of course, St. Nicholas, who you say is one of the foremost magical saints. And I guess it's safe to say that he's the prototype for our modern-day Santa Claus. So tell us a little bit about St. Nick, why he's considered magical, and does he have anything, does the fact that he's magical have anything to do with the legend of the three boys who were lured by the butcher and who tried to do a Sweeney Todd on them?
Story? Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
I think we should explain what is meant by magical saints, because for a lot of people, saint is such a difficult word. Saint is, someone who's super devout and did everything right and, never did anything wrong. And after they die, they're held up as a paradigm, basically someone who is in judgment of you, someone to compare yourself to that you can never match up to or maybe wouldn't want to match up to. But, over the years, and it was a discovery to me to see how many saints are evoked in magical spells and rituals. And these aren't recent, these are ancient. And it's something the Church has, the Vatican has had a problem with, not just recently, but since there have been saints. Mm-hmm. And there are some saints, it's not all saints. There are some saints who genuinely seem to be stodgy role models and nothing else. But you have these, and then you have saints who are tremendous miracle workers, like St. Jude, for instance, but who may not be invoked in a lot of magic spells. What they are they're providers of miracles or intercessors. But then you have these saints who are invoked in so many rituals, and there is, tremendous controversy as to whether is it really the saint who is this magical? Is it a pagan god in disguise, or a pagan goddess, or there are all kinds of possibilities. And among these magical saints are some of the earliest saints, Saint Lucy, John the Baptist in particular, who is just, the saint of magical plants, and Saint Nicholas. And there is many saints, and the saints who have been removed from the canon roll, Saint Barbara, Saint Lucy, are people who, there's no documentation for them. We don't know if they actually ever existed as walking, talking people. But Saint Nicholas, what we do know of him, there is a historical man, Saint Nicholas, who was a bishop in what is now Turkey. When he died, he was renowned for the miracles he provided, and legends. And who knows? This is the saint's mythos. Did these things happen? Were these legends that just came up afterwards? We don't know. He is a tremendous miracle worker. His feast day is not Christmas Eve. People often think it is, but it's earlier in December. And if you go to places like Holland, where he is their patron saint, it's St. Nicholas's Eve that he comes and he gives gifts rather than on Christmas. Christmas has an awful lot of pagan elements, tons of pagan elements in it. St. Nicholas, among the legends he is famous for, is his parents died when he was young and left him a fortune. And so he was a very, very wealthy and generous young man. And he basically went around and saved people from all sorts of, he saved young women from, prostitution, the fate worse than death. And the legend is that at a time of famine, there was a local butcher who kidnapped 3 boys, possibly brothers, and killed them, brined them, and was planning to sell them as pork and make a nice profit. But Nicholas knew. One way or another, Nicholas knew. And Nicholas went and resurrected the boys and saved them, which is, a pretty good miracle.
Yes, it is. It is. And again, that was one of the things I went,
He's
wow.
a gift giver. Now, the thing with Nicholas, as with some of the really, really popular saints, is that it is very, very, very likely that under the mask, when people like the syncretism, they tend to talk about modern Santeria. They talk about modern voodoo. But the concept of syncretism, which is where, when states and nations and regions became officially Christian, meaning that the leadership was Christian, whether or not it pleased the regular rank and file people, it became forbidden to venerate pagan spirits of all kinds. And it is not the nature of people to give up on their spirits easily, particularly at times when they may need them, or particularly when you think that, maybe this is a passing thing, and in 20 years or less, they'll be back, and, Odin or Poseidon or whoever will be angry at me if I gave up on them too easily. You don't want to be fickle with your spiritual relationships. Right. And so often it is a fairly international and very human thing to do, to mask forbidden spirits under the faces of under the faces of acceptable and approved spirits. And so lingering under St. Nicholas, who is a very, very widely venerated saint, are numerous pagan gods. So, you do have the actual St. Nicholas, who was a historical person. This is not, not saying he didn't exist, but you have Odin in the Germanic territories. You have Poseidon in his home turf in Anatolia, where he came from. He inherited a lot of the functions. And it's not something we in the United States think about St. Nicholas, but St. Nicholas is the patron of mariners, of sailors, of seafarers. And in Turkey and Greece, in the parts of Russia, he's very, very popular in the Orthodox Church, as much as no more so than in the Western Church. St. Nicholas took on a lot of the roles of Poseidon, and if you think of Santa Claus, Poseidon's tree is the pine tree. So what do we have? It's a Christmas tree. He also took on a lot of the functioning of Artemis, which I think is very interesting. He took on this feminine role as well. He took in Russia. There's Father Frost Morozko, and he's a very, very fascinating saint, and a lot of horned deities. The horns aren't on his head anymore; they're on the reindeer, but the horns are still there. And Santa often has a helper, Krampus or Black Pete or Ruprecht, and a lot of his helpers have horns. Almost in some cases they're like alter egos. There's a theory. One of the theories is that Santa Claus has masks Odin, but Krampus, maybe Loki, which is just such an interesting concept. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
They kind of match in a sense. Well, and interesting that you were talking about all the different things, because I had read that, Saint Nick, and if you want to refer to him as Santa Claus in our vernacular, but he doesn't get vacation after the winter holidays, because he's also, again, the patron saint responsible for Greece, Russia, sailors, merchants, pawnbrokers, bakers, prisoners, children, and wolves. Prostitutes, yeah. So he's busy all year round. It's a wonder he can manage to,
guard. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there are no vacations for saints. Not for the major saints. I think that's what distinguishes the major saints from the minor saints. The minor saints generally do go on vacation. That's why they don't, they're not on the job full time, 24/7. So they may not be as responsive toward miracles. But Saint Nicholas, whether in the guise of, Santa Claus is a very specific Christmas-oriented image, but Saint Nicholas is a great saint. He's among the foremost miracle workers around the world. And so, no, he doesn't take time off.
Poor guy. But the other... Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No. Yeah, I would argue that, because I think I'm going to miss something good if I continue. So you say it.
I don't remember. You go.
Here we go. Okay. When you think of it, just cut in and interrupt me. I was really surprised, though, to find out that St. Nicholas and St. Peter have something in common, according to Russian lore.
The keys to the kingdom, yeah.
Yes. I mean, who'd have thunk it,
St. Nicholas is really, really, really beloved in Russia. He is, and there's just this great Russian and other Slavic countries, but especially Russian, mythology about St. Nick. And I have to preface that people don't understand what the word, or they misunderstand what the word mythology means. People think, when they say it's a myth, it means it's not true. Or when you say it's mythology, they're offended because, mythology is about ancient gods who don't exist anymore. And that's another story. But mythology means a sacred story. And it can be taken literally or not. There are a lot of ways to interpret a myth. There are a lot of ways of expressing the truth. But there are these tremendous myths of St. Nicholas, and St. Nicholas is the common person's friend in his mythology. He's not, and it's interesting because if you look at the St. Nick who comes on the eve of his feast in Holland, for instance, to judge children, he comes as a bishop. He may ask the children, it's not like trick or treat. He may actually ask the children to recite, religious information and to prove they've been good children. So he's very formal and official. But in Russia, he's warm, and he's helpful and friendly, not judgy, the way some other saints are. And one of the stories is that St. Nicholas, being such a highly placed saint, also, he's got the spare set of keys to paradise. So, St. Peter's at the gates, but St. Peter in Russia and elsewhere, St. Peter is also a very magical saint, but he's kind of a cursing saint. If you look at mystic saints and sages, there's a couple, there are various rituals involved with St. Peter that are not very friendly.
Wow.
So St. Peter is at the gates, deciding whether you can come in or not. And the hope is that, to put your request to St. Nicholas instead, because St. Nicholas is much more likely to let you in.
Oh, so now we know who the guy the go-to guy is.
Well, and if St. Nicholas, there's another part to that story too. But people would like write notes to St. Nicholas that they would like put in the hand of the deceased, or pin to their clothing before they were buried. St. Nicholas, please let this poor sinner in.
Yeah.
But St. Joseph is considered the poor man's friend and really not judgy. St. Joseph does not have the keys, but he's a carpenter, and he constructed a ladder. And so, if St. Nick and St. Peter won't let you in, you can ask St. Joe to let you in the back way. That you climb in the window.
It's good to know who to call on. Honestly, it is, and we have more than one choice. But so, it would be nice.
Well, that's the magical attitude, though. You can't give up.
Well, yeah, exactly.
If you're going to give up, don't even bother with the spell. And people think like a magic spell, it's like on TV. Willa Rosenberg, you do it, you get the ingredients, and poof, it works, or it doesn't. But it's working. Sometimes you got to play with it a little bit. Sometimes if it doesn't work the first time, you got to tweak it. Or, as with saints, if you really need a miracle, if the first thing doesn't work, you need to find the one that does, or the spirit, or the goddess, or the fairy queen. You need to find. It's like knocking on. I don't know. It's like panhandling. You really desperately need $10. I know it's a scam. Like in New York City, people are always coming around. I need money to get by bus, and usually it's a scam. But let's just say you really need $10 to get on the bus. If the first person says no, if you're going to pack it in right there, you'll never get home. Mm-hmm. You have to keep trying until you find that sympathetic heart, whether with a person or with a spiritual being, and that familiarity where, I'm speaking about that, Pete and Nick and Tony and Joe, that familiarity is not a bad thing, and it's not meant to be disrespectful, but you need to know them. Because you are much more likely to be able to enter a relationship in which you find a saint that you can love, or a goddess that you can love, and who will love you back if you comprehend who they are. It's not, I have tons of spells. When I teach classes, I always give examples of the spells that didn't work, because I think the spells that don't work are more interesting. I cast a spell and it worked, That doesn't necessarily help anybody, that's just looking for applause. But a spell with, there's a very famous banishing spell with San Alejo, Saint Alexis. And it's also, that's in 5,000 Spells, and it's also in Mystic Saints and Sages. There's an additional one, there's an extra one in Mystic Saints and Sages. But it was taught to me by someone who taught me the mechanics, but not the heart. I didn't understand. It's sort of a nice banishing spell. It is a spell for when your relatives stay too long.
It's a kinder, gentler banishing spell.
Well, you don't want anything bad to happen. You don't want anything bad to happen. It's not a malicious spell. You just really need to move on. It's the friends or people who just, they won't go. And it sort of sends them to, to a nicer place, to better situations. They end up with a good reason to leave.
Yeah.
But I didn't comprehend. I didn't know. I didn't even realize San Alejo, there's a little chant. I didn't even realize it was a saint. It was just, just say this, and I did. And for that and for a couple other reasons, the first time I did it, that spell didn't work for me. But I think that now, now it would work. Now I comprehend. So that comprehension it's very helpful.
It is. It's vital. Knowing what you're doing, but also what's behind it, and putting all that intent into it. It's directing it in the right way that way.
Yeah.
And there's a much better chance of it working. And you said you didn't know that she was a saint. Well, when I was reading about Saint Lucy, I didn't know very much, if anything, about her at all. and was very surprised to find out that, according to legend, she accompanies Father Christmas on his gift-giving rounds,
Mrs. Christmas.
sometimes referred to as Mrs. Christmas. Yeah, and also, though, that she plays a major part in the Wild Hunt,
Yeah.
and that several female spirits related to Christmas, like
Yeah.
Freya or Hulda and others, may wear her mask. I mean, that
Yeah.
was very enlightening.
Yeah. I think especially the Swedish customs, they have a beautiful custom where, the young lady in the family wakes up in the morning and makes the rest of she dresses up and she's got the crown of candles. I used to work with someone who had spent a tremendous amount of time in Sweden, and she had done this. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful tradition, but it's so clearly Freya.
Mm-hmm.
There's a paradox there, because the story of St. Lucy, the traditional, there are a couple different variations on her story, but the heart of her story is she is a young Christian girl, she's an early saint in Sicily, who has dedicated herself to Christ in a life of devotion and chastity. And she's young and she's chaste. And yet in the afterlife, centuries later, Lucy, she's kidnapping scoundrels and doing. It's one of my favorite. It's from what is now Czechoslovakia, from Bohemia. One of the legends of St. Lucy is on the eve of her feast, she prowls around looking for ne'er-do-wells, and she kidnaps them and she brings them underground. She's got the subterranean territory where she kind of slits open their stomachs and stuffs them with straw and adds them to her doll collection.
Oh, no.
I have a doll collection. I always like that one. Because I get this vision, all these people, people who disappear while they're underground on a shelf.
And while you're telling me this, that old Italian song, Santa Lucia?
Yeah.
It started going through my head, and I think it's a song that venerates her. And then you're telling me this in my other ear, and I'm laughing my head off sitting here.
Well, I mean, she's kidnapping, scoundrels and bad people and, perpetrators. She's not stealing, I mean, she's kind of playing a Krampus-like role. Yeah,
she's being the pagan and old Dexter, because that's what he does now.
Yes,
I mean,
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, he's being her.
Yeah, those that deserve it.
She's a big deal in Hungarian folk traditions, and they actually explain it that they kind of explain it as there's kind of two St. Lucies. There's there's the one that you read in the Catechism with traditional story, and then there's that other strange one who does all kinds of stuff. Very much like a very, very popular saint now. I mean, one of my favorites, Saint Martha. Mm-hmm. And there is Saint Martha of Bethany, who is in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. And then in about the 12th century, an alter ego evolves, Martha the Dominator, based on legends, not on the Bible, but on legends of Saint Martha and her skills as a snake charmer or a dragon tamer. And it becomes sort of a unofficial philosophical, theological argument. Are they the same being? Or is it like, Durga and Kali, where, Durga can't vanquish the demon and Kali is an emanation. So they're the same, but they're different. Mm-hmm. Because people ask Martha, the women, she's very much a woman saint, women ask Martha the Dominator to do things that, the church might not want her to do. So if she's doing things that, for example, the church encourages women to be obedient to their husbands. Mm-hmm. Women ask, but, many of these husbands are abusive. Mm-hmm. Women are, afraid of their husbands, and these husbands are not, behaving in nice ways. And so Martha the Dominator is the saint you call upon to bind your husband's hands so he can't hit you, to make him come home at night so he's not out gallivanting with whomever. And are they the same being? Or, are they completely different? And, a lot of people, there are people who prefer that they be the saint, that Martha the Dominator is a saint. And there are people who really don't want her to be a saint. They feel much better talking with her if she's not a saint. And very similarly with St. Lucy, although I think not as publicly, at least in a lot of these traditions, Krampus, St. Lucy, the Wild Hunt, and the Wild Hunt is all over. But a lot of things are Central European, and they haven't really come west yet. But St. Lucy, so you have the St. Lucy of the Catechism, who is chaste and, would rather die than get married and have sex. With her, she just doesn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And then you have the St. Lucy, who is the guardian of witches and who leads the Wild Hunt. And, in Hungarian tradition, folk tradition, not official tradition, but folk tradition, the eve of St. Lucy's feast, which, if you don't want to look at it as official Yule, St. Lucy's feast day, and Lucy comes from the word light. St. Lucy's feast day is before the calendar changes. That was the winter solstice. Mm-hmm. And so on that eve, women weren't supposed to do any kind of, traditional women's work. No sewing, no spinning, no cleaning. They were supposed to go out and party with Lucy. Mm. And so, who is a strange creature? Mm. But yeah, Lucy's apparently changed her mind about chastity, and in Switzerland is sometimes believed to be married to Father Christmas. Mm-hmm. She gives the gifts to the good girls, and he gives the gifts to the good boys.
Mm-hmm. Well, hence the Mrs. Christmas thing. But here also there is that, you're talking about she being good, she being bad, but in the metaphysical sense, there is always that duality. There's always the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the light and the dark. That the two sides make one whole. So I guess it's up to people to choose according to what they're comfortable with, especially when you're dealing with saints and stuff.
Yeah.
The side that resonates to you. But
Lucy is also, the matron saint of unofficially. Mm-hmm. Officially, she is the matron saint of people with eye ailments or eye doctors or anything to do with literal visual issues. But unofficially, she's the matron saint of clairvoyance. Mm. For those who don't need eyes to see, because Lucy, if you look at her official imagery, usually she has a tray with eyes. That's how you'll know Lucy. She may or may not have eyes in her head, but she usually has a plate with eyes on it that she is bestowing to the viewer. And you can interpret that as she is giving you the vision. She is giving you the second sight. And it's actually in parts of in Austria, I think, Lucy's light is a synonym for clairvoyance, for second sight.
Wow. That's nice to know.
So those of us who are readers, St. Lucy, she's our saint too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I've just added one. I'm going to have to get to know her a little bit better. Now, in doing a little homework here, I kept running into Odin's name being related to Christmas, bestowing gifts at Yuletide upon his people, riding a magical flying horse across the sky. And I'd always thought of Odin as the god of war and death, and the guy who hung for 9 days, pierced by his own spear on the world tree, and also that he was kind of
grim.
and kind of a mischievous imp as well. But I never had heard about his benevolent side. That was another kind of eye-opening thing, because to me, like you said before, Odin and Loki kind of, are on the same wavelength, according to what I always thought.
But Odin, among the legends, he's the traveler, the traveler with, there are aspects of Gandalf, with the big hat. He's wandering. He kind of looks a little disreputable, and he travels. He likes to come into the realm of people and see what's going on. And it is the underlying theme is you have to be, you should always be polite to everyone you meet because you never know. I mean, and this is a very similar stories are told of, in the Jewish tradition of Elijah the prophet.
Mm-hmm.
Elijah the prophet also wanders. He looks like a beggar. So, but you don't know. Every beggar could be Elijah the prophet. Very similarly, Odin, who wanders and is, maybe a little ragged when he's wandering. He's travel worn, and he's got the traveler's cloak and the hat over his eye. And if you look at some of the older tarot cards, you'll see it's very much images of Odin. But if you are polite and you're interesting and you're courteous, he has a reputation of being generous and benevolent, which is where, making a list. He's checking it twice. Going to see who's naughty, who's nice. Versus the people who are rude to him are, kind of in for a surprise.
So he's kind of an eye for an eye kind of guy. Be nice to me, I'll be nice to you, and if not, look out, kind of thing.
I think he's very godlike and he's detached. So it's not so simple. It's not just, shove me, I'll shove you. I think it's almost more, he's really old. I mean, hanging himself on the world tree because he wanted the runes. He wants knowledge. He wants wisdom. He wants poetry. He likes women. He likes things that are interesting. He enjoys Loki's company. I think Loki makes him laugh. He's got the ravens. The ravens go out every day, and they bring him all the news. He's a very curious being. So, I don't know. He might let you behave badly for a while, just to see what would happen.
testing. Let's see how bad this person can get.
Yeah,
well,
because there's a godlike quality. I mean, it's godlike, not human. I mean, so there's that greater capacity.
Yeah, I love this stuff. I really do. And
but Odin is very much, and Odin isn't a simple god of war. He's like the god of, I don't know, of the special ops people. The berserkers, the wolf shirts, those are, as opposed to the really straightforward soldiers. I mean, he was a god who made people nervous, as opposed to Thor, who is just beloved. I mean, Thor. I mean, you could look at almost. I mean, ironically, I think the personality that Saint Nick manifests in Russia is much more Thor-like. He's forgiving. He's forgiving. He's like, he's like a god you can imagine having a beer with. In heaven, I'll sit and have beer with Thor or with Saint Nick. Odin's a little, Odin is an occultist,
Well, I was also, again, learning more, that Odin and St. Lucy are two of the main participants in the Wild Hunt.
The Wild Hunt is traditionally led by a male and a female. Not always. Sometimes there's only a male leader, sometimes there's only a female leader, but various Germanic witch goddesses will lead it. And Odin, the mythology that we're given, like in books, tends to be very focused. And mythology isn't. It's sort of big and dreamlike, and it's almost like, I think very much, if you read comic books, the way comic books have multiple universes, Spider-Man in this universe behaves like this, but, and my daughter could tell you the numbers, I can't, but universe number X, he behaves like that, and, in this universe, this comic book character has a relationship with this other one, but not in this other universe where, they have this like true love with some other character. It's dreamlike and it's fluid, and that's what mythology is very much like. And so Odin, we have like Odin paired up with Frigg, but Odin, Odin likes the ladies, and Frigg has a lot of patience. So there are all these Germanic goddesses who may or may not have a relationship with them, but who are also associated with the Wild Hunt. Herta and Hulda and Bertha and Frau Gode, who actually may be Mrs. Odin. I mean, her name may literally mean Mrs. Odin. And then you have St. Lucy, and, Cain sometimes leads the wild hunt. And, yeah, I mean, it's just this massive parade. The concept of the wild hunt, the concept of this, if you're not familiar with it, the wild hunt is flying now. The wild hunt is this parade of spirits that flies through the sky, and they're out kind of celebrating right now. They've been demonized. The Christian mythology suggests that they are out hunting damn souls, and if they catch you, they'll drag you off to hell. But that's not the original legend. A lot of the other goddesses of this time, and January 6th, which is now Epiphany, is a big day for a lot of goddesses. Befana, who is the Italian goddess who's very much associated. She's also a gift giver. Right. Hulda, Berta, they're all associated with January 6th, with Epiphany. And Berta, for instance, they're fertility goddesses, and it was believed that she had a well from which babies, kind of unborn babies, frolicked there. And when they were ready to, go to their, next incarnation, they kind of went up the well to, into a womb. But during the wild hunt, all the children who have died, and these unborn babies, for whatever reason, unborn because they're literally not born, they're just souls, or unborn because they're miscarried or aborted or whatever it is, or stillbirth, they go and they are in a procession that is led by Berta. Similar legends with Hulda. And I think it was intended to be comforting originally. It has been switched that in the wild hunt, these goddesses lead parades of unbaptized babies. So, you better hurry up and baptize your baby because they'll be stuck in the wild hunt with Berta or Hulda, who may or may not be the same goddess. But that wasn't, it depends how, it depends if you believe in that kind of a how.
Right. Exactly. Well, what's also interesting about the wild hunt and everything, well, people think that it begins at Samhain, but then they forget that it's at its height during Yule. Yes. But most people believe, again, that the veil between our worlds and the other world are the thinnest at Samhain, but during the season of Yuletide, the veil is also thin, and we can easily walk between the worlds.
It's a fluctuating veil. Midsummer is naive also. Which I think is really beneficial, because if you think that your only opportunity is that one night, Samhain, you have a migraine, you are or, if your spell just didn't work, then, you're stuck for a year. But in fact, you have a nice opportunity now. And in certain calendar systems, there was like a gap in the year at this time. There's the 12, it's what became the 12 days of Christmas. Why are there 12 days of Christmas? That's not from the New Testament. The 12, it has to do with this calendar system. There is this gap, and the veil is essentially non-existent. In a lot of northern traditions, this is the time of the year when you welcome your ancestors home. When you, very similar to the Day of the Dead.
Right. You
welcome them home, you tell stories. This is the, it's too cold to be outside, I mean, some of us are in Los Angeles and are having a better time than others. But for the, people in northern climates, there's not a lot to do outside that's pleasant or that's productive. So this is a good time to stay inside, and, you can spin, and you can tell stories, and you can invite your ancestors to feast with you. And it's something that we can continue, regardless where we are.
Yeah, and I really don't think a lot of people knew that Yuletide is as Samhain is as far as the other world happening. And, most people think of Yuletide only as twinkling lights, wassail, Yule logs, and a lot of ho-ho-hos. But it's a very spiritual time as well because of this.
It is a very spiritual time. people are sort of mocking of, these fundamentalist preachers who, if you change the letters around, Santa becomes Satan. But I learn something new every day. I think any day where I learn something new is a good day. And
Yes.
so I know that this is new for some people, and people are sort of annoyed when they think that, all these pagans are coming, taking over our holidays. But this is not, there is a tremendous amount of paganism in the way our winter holidays are celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
The Yule log that you mentioned, for instance, the Yule log probably derives from offerings to Frigga, who is an important goddess at this time of year. She's really at the height of her power. Various other European goddesses were venerated in the form of logs. Diana, Hera. The Yule log that you have, the ashes, are very magical. If you burn it down, the ashes are considered very magical, the same way Midsummer's Eve bonfire ashes are very magical,
Yeah.
and they should be preserved. If you look in 5,000 spells, there are a bunch of spells that use the ashes from Yule logs for protection, for the banishing of vermin, for I think there's some love spells. There's all sorts of things you can do with them. The mistletoe also. So these are valuable things that I know are often tossed, but those are magical items that cannot be bought in stores.
Exactly. Well, the season 2, Yule, is a very good time for divination as well as spell work.
Yes, it's one of the best times.
And I think you have perhaps conjured up a spell for the Yuletide that you might want to share?
I actually have a divination.
Okay.
This is I have spells. I have divinations. Divination is really my true love. I love divination, and it's people think of divination and it's very limited. We have so much information, but it's almost like the more information we have, the less we see. So it's all, cards and runes and that's it. But there are all kinds of rituals, and a lot of them are calendar-oriented. They're rituals that you're supposed to do at a certain time because the time is potent. And this is a Russian one. And in the traditional Russian spell, this would be done at midnight in the bathhouse, which is considered a very sacred and magical spot. And if that interests you, there's a lot of stuff in my book, Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, on the bathhouse. And there is a really excellent book. It's one of my favorite books. I don't remember the author's name right now, but it's called The Bathhouse at Midnight, which is a huge overview of Russian magical traditions. And Russian traditions are just amazing. But you can do this at home. You don't have to go out to the bathhouse. What you need are 2 mirrors and 2 candles and some privacy. So what you're going to do is you're going to set the two mirrors up. And the best kind of, I like the sort of the full-length mirror. But you can use any kind of a mirror. But what you want to do is you want to set them up so that they're reflecting each other. And then you have candles. You're supposed to use 2. But you could use 1. You could use, the number is if you have more. You can play with that. The important thing is the mirrors. And you're going to place the candles in between. And you're going to turn off the lights so the room is only lit by the candles. And what you're going to do is you're going to look in the mirrors. Ideally, you do this at midnight and Christmas Eve, but any time around that time is okay. And look at, it's almost like a fun house. And I like mirror magic. So it's like a fun house thing where, all the mirrors are reflecting each other. Look into the mirrors and look at one mirror reflecting into the other. And it's a concentration thing. So look at, you start with one and watch the other mirror reflected back. And if you can count to the 7th reflection, repeatedly, your future for the year or possibly more will be shown to you.
Wow.
Yeah. I like that. There's a lot of, if you look at old Halloween postcards, there are a lot with mirrors and people looking at mirrors. It's this kind of a spell they're evoking. There is a simpler one with onions, which is if you have to make a decision, you need as many onions, and this is a nice inexpensive spell because essentially all you need are some flower pots, some dirt, and a bag of onions. And,
That's easy.
You need an onion for, so let's say you have a situation and you don't know what to do. You need as many onions as you have options. I like to add an extra one for maybe if there's an option that you haven't thought of yet. The mystery option. Maybe you need to think of something else. But you could have 2, you could have 5, whatever number of possible situations or decisions you have in mind. And you're going to charge it in your hand, each onion. So, hold those onions in your hand and communicate what your issue is and what your question is, and write out, the option. Onion 1 is, do it. So, you could write that in a little piece of paper and stick it under the onion. Option 2, don't do it. So you write that down and you stick it under that onion. And you keep going and you leave it overnight and then plant each onion with a little piece of paper. Just, stick it in some dirt. And you can, on the flower pot, you can write something to remind you which is the option. And then wait to see which one will come into leaf, which one will blossom. As if you keep onions too long, you'll start to get you get the leaves growing out of them. Whichever one grows out first, that's your answer.
Wow, I like that.
The other thing you can do, and this is I'm trying to give simple spells because I think there's all kinds of stuff you can buy, but it's really nice to have the simple, spontaneous spells you can just sort of do off the cuff.
Yeah.
First of all, listen for that wild hunt. Traditionally, if you hear crows at night, and crows are Odin's bird, and crows are I have been woken up. If you live in an area with crows, they will be your alarm clock. So they are not night birds. But if you hear them at night, that's a sign of the wild hunt going by. Also geese, honking geese, which are birds that are very much associated with death, spirits of death. So if you hear those at night, the wild hunt is passing by. If you hear them, make a wish. Ask them for help. Ask them for what you need. Ask them for fun. And good fun, happy fun. Be sure. Because, you could be asking Odin and Loki. So, not fun for you. Fun for them. Be careful how you ask for things.
Definition is very important in this, yes.
Make sure you phrase things correctly. Especially with the smarter ones who like word games. Because often the joke is on you. Or, Christmas Eve. It's almost the end of the year. A lot of old Christmas traditions. Christmas has periodically been banned in the U.S. The Puritans didn't like Christmas celebrations, too pagan.
That's right.
So a lot of our traditions have been moved to New Year's. So, the ball drop, all the drinking and partying and the effervescence, those are often associated with Christmas. It wasn't a solemn holiday. It descends from the Saturnalia, that Roman holiday of gift giving, and memories of the golden age when people didn't have to work. So there's this wild spirit in this. Midnight, go out, look for 3 stars. When you see, or you can do it earlier. You can if it gets dark where I am. But if it gets dark, look for those 3 stars. And when you see those 3 stars, make a wish. Focus. More than a wish, I want, but really focus. See your goal in front of you, because that's a spell. When you can see that goal, even if it doesn't exist yet, even if it doesn't ring true to you, you don't really believe that it can be, see yourself wealthy, see yourself in love, see yourself healthy, whatever it is that you need. Those 3 stars, think of it as almost like a portal to the sacred, and you're just focusing your energy and your desires and your will into that portal and let it go.
Yeah, I love, like you said, the simple things that you can just do without having to plan a big ritual and stuff are equally effective.
Yeah, and you didn't invest it's not stressful. It's not supposed to be stressful. It's supposed to make your life better. Magic spells are intended to make your life better.
Yes, they
and
are.
The spell itself, you want a spell because you have stress in your life. The spell is not supposed to become more stress.
Exactly.
If it doesn't work, then then you'll think of something else. You'll play with it, and something else will work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we are just about out of time, but we could go on for days. I'd like you to tell people where they can find more out about you and your books, and I think then it might be appropriate to end the show with kind of a Yuletide blessing. What do you think?
That would be lovely.
Okay.
My books, you can find everything on my website, and it's my name, JUDIKAILLES.com, and there are descriptions of all my books and services and bio and contact information, and I'm all over the web, and I'm slow answering. I apologize in advance. I'm telling you now, I'm still answering mail from months ago, but I look forward to hearing from you.
There you go. So what kind of a blessing shall we do for the Yule?
Blessings of joy and prosperity and good health. And, Yule, in the most conventional sense, in the non-pagan sense, it celebrates a birth. Mm-hmm. And so, the rebirth of the sun. Mm-hmm. And so the rebirth of our hopes and our opportunities, and replenishing of our energies that have just been worn down through this long year.
Mm-hmm. And so we bestow those blessings on everybody that's listening, and know that if you're open to it, it can be very easily. Yeah. All right. Well, Judika, thank you. It is always a pleasure having you stir my cauldron. And it does. It really does. So you have to come back. That's the caveat here. You must come back. And I want you to have a very blessed Yule. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, blessed Yule, and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2013. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.